All right, so I've got a question for you that I'm sure some of you have the answer right there on the tip of your tongue. It's probably a question that you may have had asked or heard talk of all the way back to when you were in Sunday school. It's a very basic question, but it's one that was very profound for Jesus and for those who asked him this question. The question is this: what is the greatest commandment? You know, throughout the gospel stories, there are different people that come to Jesus and ask him this question. And sometimes it seems as if they're trying to ask him this question to entrap him. Other times you wonder if the questioner is really just asking it because they're actually curious about what Jesus thinks or how Jesus will respond to that question. One of the places that it is asked is in John's gospel. John chapter 22. There is this confrontation where Jesus is having discussions, and there's religious leaders there, there's Pharisees there, and his responses to different things that are going on silences the crowd. And then in chapter 22 of Matthew's gospel, it says this: a teacher came up to Jesus, one of the leaders, said to him, "Teacher, which commandment is the greatest of all?" And Jesus said, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and the first commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself." Now, as I said, this is probably a question that you could have answered even without me having read it, because it's one of those things that's just kind of ingrained in us. We are to love the Lord our God with all our heart, with all our soul, with all our strength, with all our might. That's the number one thing. But then Jesus throws in this second commandment, which he says is equal. It's equal to it, not because God is equal to anything else, but because by responding in this second way, what you are really doing is you are loving God. That second response, the one that Jesus said is second in all commands, is to love your neighbor as yourself. Now, I've always looked at that and kind of had this understanding of what that meant. It meant that the way in which I love myself, I have to love others with the same kind of enthusiasm and in the same amount. But you know, I was reading a couple weeks ago this devotional, and the person that was writing this devotional really challenged that understanding. In the devotional, she said, you know what, there's nothing in Jesus' response that has any inclination of this idea of as much as. She said, no, if you really look at what Jesus says, he says, you shall love your neighbor as yourself, meaning equal to, or perhaps as if another is really just an extension of self. All right, now think about that for a moment. What she's saying is, in Jesus' response, he's not only making no distinction between us and others, he's actually connecting us in a very meaningful way to others. We are supposed to love God with our entire and whole being. Okay, number one. But the second thing is we are to love and care for and be connected with others as if they were a very extension of our own being. This devotional writer says what Jesus is doing there is he is trying to connect all people together. Because you see, the truth is, those who were asking those questions, they probably thought very highly of themselves. These religious leaders probably saw themselves above those others who were sitting around Jesus at the time. And when Jesus says you are to love others as you love yourself, he's saying don't put yourself above anyone else, but recognize that we are all connected in this kingdom of God. The greatest commandment, the greatest thing that links us together then is our love for God, but then also in love with God's creation, which is ourself, and by extension, everyone else, all the other children of God. You know, I think going forward, I'm going to look at that response differently. This response of Jesus to what is the greatest commandment, I'm going to look at it differently. And my hope and my prayer is it will help me not only understand Jesus' words better, but also understand my place with others. I need to make sure that the quality of life, the experience of life, the meaning of life is as important to me about myself as it is with others. It's challenging, but whoever said Jesus' words weren't challenging?